Hello, Odoers. In this video, I'm going to be talking about routes. This is in version 15, but it is very similar in version 13, 14, and 15. 16 is yet to be released. So let's get into it. How does routes work? What is the purpose of them? And how do we use them? Right. So routes are effectively a core part of inventory. Now, before I get into routes, the one thing we need to understand is how the locations are being set up. So if for starters, I'll go into configuration, and we'll go into locations. Right. So here are my locations. I've got an Auckland warehouse in which I've got an Auckland stock, and I've got a couple of shelf numbers in each one of those locations. I've also got a input order processing, because when I do the receipts of the goods, by default, it comes into my inwards goods location. And after I process it, maybe I have to do a QA check, maybe I have to do a put away rule, any of those sorts of things. Then it goes from my inwards location into the shelves where they go, right? And just for the purposes of explaining a few other things, what I also want to do is I also want to create a bulk location. So as an example, I could go into create, and I could create a bulk location. And the parent for the bulk location will again be just Auckland, because bulk location is not a pick phase. So I don't want the sales orders to be going to the bulk location to ask it to be picked. When I go to the process, I'll tell you how to set up a replenishment rule so that when the pick phase needs stock, that it can get it from the bulk. Right. For the purposes of the time being, in here, I'm just creating one bulk. But of course, as you are aware, we can create further locations under bulk. By that, what I mean is, if under bulk you have a location called MU101, you can create that, and the parent location for that can be the bulk location. So that is a shelf inside the zone called bulk. So technically speaking, I have got three zones. I got a bulk zone, I have got a receiving zone, and I have got a stock zone. So that's my setup that I'm going to be working with. Right. In terms of routes, how it is being set up and stuff. So under configuration, we have routes in here. And once we have gone into the routes, I'll come to this as to how it is being set up. Because I need to first go through the min-max rules and all of those things before I come in here. Then it will probably make sense. So just from a screen perspective, where it is under configuration routes, I'll come back to this in a minute. Let's go to the products for the starting. Right, so I have got some products in here, and let me pick up a product which we do not have in stock so that I can start the rule and see how the process works off. Now, it will be easier to check things if there are no purchase orders outstanding, right? So for the time being, what I'm going to be doing in my demonstration system is I will go through all the RFQs that are there, and I will cancel them. Just so that it's easier. If you don't do this, it's kind of hard to follow it. The reason why I say it's hard to follow is if a draft purchase order is present for the same vendor for which the product is going to be creating a PO for, it will add that line to the same existing draft RFQ. And you could be spending your time looking for, hey, is there a new RFQ created? Why is not created a new RFQ? So hence, for that purpose, I'm just canceling all the existing RFQs so that we can look at all the new RFQs that gets triggered in here, right? 4 more to go. I should have probably done this before I started my video, but that's all right. I learn something new every day myself. Right. One more, last one. Cool. So I have got no RFQs at this stage. Cool. And the magic product that I will be using for our sample, let us use a magnetic board. So it is a storable product. At this stage, there is no quantity on hand, no reorder rule set up. Perfect. Let's get started on this. Right. So the first thing I'll do is I'll create a reorder rule in here for my Auckland stock that, look, I should have a minimum of 5 and let's say a maximum of 10 in here. This is a simple rule. All that needs is I need a minimum of 5 and max of 10. And the other thing I need to make sure that under the purchase, there's no vendor, but under the purchase, there should be a vendor linked in here. Otherwise, the rules are not going to work. So I will go search and more to see whom I can set up in here. Ready-made. Ready-made sounds like a good person. Right, and they supplied to me for $10. Cool. So I have now got a product in which I have set up a min-max, and I have set up who is supplying. Right. The next thing to make sure that the routes are working is under the inventory tab. This is where the routes are being shown. So the routes is going to define how the goods is going to come in, whether I'm going to be buying it, I'm going to be manufacturing it. In this example, I'll be following the buy rule because then it's easy to see the RFQs for it. Great. So what I do need to do is make sure I have a tick on the buy, because if I don't have a tick on the buy, what it's going to do is it will not know how to replenish the product. So I'll show that as an example and what that messages looks like. For me to trigger the process which is going to create the RFQ, typically I will have to go into inventory, and under operations, if I go run scheduler, this is a process which looks for the minimum, maximum, if they're available, not available. And what this will do is it will trigger the necessary processes that we need from that perspective. So if I go back to the magnetic board in here, you see in here, it says, hey, that you set a min and max in here, but you have not given me any ways or routes on how to replace them, because we have not told in here. So what this means is you've put in a requirement, but you've not told me how I need to fulfill it, right? Right. So I will now go in here and mark this as buy. And because I've resolved it, I will mark this issue as being done, right? So now when you see some messages in your product, you know what that message means. Great. So let us just do a refresh of my RFQs. Well, there are certain other products that require them. So this is a flip over stuff, and this is Office Lab. Cool. We are not dealing with those two products. Our product is a magnetic board. Great. Now that that is being set up, I shall go into your operations and run the scheduler again. And in here, if I now go back to my RFQs in here, I see that there is a new RFQ created for ReadyMat in here, and this has asked me to purchase 10 units. The reason it has asked me to purchase 10 units because my maximum quantity is 10 in here. So hence it has asked me to purchase this 10 units. Hope that makes sense, right? Now, from a receiving perspective, what you will notice, the default receipts in Auckland has been set up the Auckland input location. That's what I've done by default in here. Sometimes it could be Auckland stock. If you're buying, if you do not have a receiving location and you do not have a bulk location, you could be receiving into Auckland stock and you could be selling from Auckland stock. So that is quite possible. Right. So now I have got this PO being created, or a draft PO being created, because the demand was created by the min-max. Easy enough. Cool. Now let me do one more thing in here. Let me say I wanted to have the min-max for 2 locations, right? One is my AKL stock, and hypothetically, I have got one more location now in, as I said, I have one more location called bulk. So when it's for bulk, I will say, you know what, I need about 50 of those and up to 100 of those. Great. Now what I've done is I have created a demand for the bulk, right? But I'm yet to tell it how does the stock come into bulk, right? So we need to tell the system, hey, you know what, when bulk needs the stock, you can go and buy it as well. And when Auckland stock needs it, it should be taking the stock from bulk. So the first time I'm going to be creating a new rule, and that new rule, what I want to be able to do is when Auckland stock, i.e. the pick phase, needs any quantity, I want it to create an internal transfer to move stock from bulk to the pick phase. And when bulk needs the stock, I want it to create a purchase order to fulfill the need, right? So if I go into my, so I've done that. So if I go into my configuration, into my routes, I'll create a new route in here for starters. So this is going to be, shall get my spelling right one day, replenish STK from bulk. Great. and I'm specifying right now whether it is applicable at a product level or at a warehouse level or at a category. To make things simple, I will just follow products for the time being. I'll come to this product categories and warehouses and packages and sales or flexibility. Right. So I've got replenished stock from bulk. Now I can go in here and add it. So what it's asking me, I'm creating a new rule to say, I've given it a name. Now I'm going to be telling up what steps are involved in it. So in this step is get stock. So what I want to be able to do is I want it to pull the stock from, I'm using a internal type operation from bulk into my destination location called stock, right? Does that make sense? So when AKL stock needs any quantity, I can tell it to say that, hey, you can pick it up. You can create an internal transfer to move the stock from bulk to AKL stock. Great. So I have now created a new rule. Cool. Excellent. Now what I'll do is I'll go back to the product, right? Because I need to say how the routes are going to be looking like. So if I go back to my magnetic board in here, if I now go into the inventory in here, so I have got this replenish from bulk also available as an option. So, and if I click on the view diagram in here for the Auckland warehouse, because the first time I'm in here, it's asking me to give some information. So it will show me the routes as to how it is coming in here. So as an example, the receipts are going to come to Auckland input, and Auckland input is going to create an internal transfer to move it to Auckland stock. At this stage, my bulk is hanging around because there is no route that I've selected to fulfill the need in there, right? So I will go back in here into my inventory, and I will say, you know what, you can use this replenish from stock in here. Great. So what I will do in this particular case is, if I go back to my reordering rule, I can go into here and choose the preferred route. So by this, what I can do is, whenever the Auckland stock needs a stock, it can use this route to get it for bulk. And in the bulk location, I will say, you know what, when bulk needs a stock, you can go and buy it from, create a purchase order. That is right. So now that we have done this, I need to do one more thing. I just need to go and look at the buy route to say how that is being set up and what it means. And one change is something we need to make for this to happen. So if I go into configurations and if I go into routes and if I look at buy in here, so what it says is for this location, so if I go into the details in here, the action is buy, and it is going to be using the operation type Auckland receipts, and it is going to put it into the destination location called input, right? Now, what I wanted to do is in here, if I wanted to do the same for bulk as well. So what, if you read this in here, what it says is when products are needed in Auckland input, a request is created to fulfill the need in here, right? I can do one more thing in here as well. So if, say, for example, if I can do this, action is buy, operation type is Auckland receipts, and the destination location is going to be bulk. So now what I'm doing is I'm telling it, you know what, in buy, within the route called buy, because one route can have multiple steps in there, for this particular location, when a demand is being created, you can go and happily create a purchase order using the operation type called Auckland receipts. Great. So now let me go back to my RFQs in here and just cancel them out, just so that I can create a new one. Wood corner is a flip over. I don't really care about that. And Azure interior with the office lamp, don't care about that as much. Yeah, cool. Excellent. So my purchase orders, RFQs are kind of blank. Just a recap of the product as to how I set up in here under products. I go to my magnetic board. So I have set up 2 reordering rules, and I've set up the routes in them as to how they are going to be getting the stock when the stock is required in those 2 locations. And again, from an inventory perspective, I have said what are the routes that are applicable on the product. So now if I go back into here under operations and run the scheduler again, right? So I'll just refresh the product in here just to make sure there is, there's no exceptions. That means everything has worked fine. So if I now go in here and look at the filter for RFQs in here, for the ready mat in here, it has created a quantity of 100. And this 100, previously, if you recollect, when it had created it for 10. And the reason it had created it for 10 was because the max in that stock was 10. But now I've asked it that this need to replenish from the bulk, right? So because I've set up the rule in there to buy for bulk, it has created the demand in the bulk has created this particular request for quotation. Now there is still a demand that is being needed for the replenish from bulk, right? And how will I see that? So if I go into inventory now, I can see there are internal transfers. There are 2 internal transfers waiting. So if I go in there and if I take the ready out in here, so there is one that is created now and is waiting. And what this is doing is it is saying you need to take this magnetic board, 10 quantities from bulk to the stock location. And this was created just a minute ago, as you can see, when I had run the scheduler, and the trigger for this was effectively within my products under the inventory in here, and also within the reordering level, I had selected the correct routes. So hope this helps in terms of how you can set up a location and how you can set up the routes in here. Now, hypothetically speaking, if you had one more product which you buy, you don't have big quantities of, you have small quantities of, let's say, and you buy always and put it into your big phase, right? Hypothetically, if that is the case, let's say, for example, I will see if there is another product that I can use as an example, plastic laminate. Once I open, yeah, it is a storable product. There are no reordering levels, or there is a bill of material. I'm not doing manufacturing as yet. I'm still in purchasing, so I'll probably skip that. I just want to look for something that does not have a bill of material, just to keep things simple. Right. Yeah, this letter trade looks like a good candidate. So in here, I've got it as a storable product. Under inventory, I can put the route to say buy, right? And here under the reordering rules, I can create a reordering rule for AKL stock. I will just go minimum of 7 and a maximum of 12 in this case as an example. And I just need to make sure there is a supplier available for it. No, there isn't. Hey, for fun, let us use the same supplier called ReadyMat that I had used for the other one. ReadyMat. Right, and this time it's not a big item, it's a $2 item. Cool, so I have set up the min-max rules in here, and under the inventory, I've said that I'll be buying it, and hence I don't need to set up a preferred route because there's only one route for me to get that in, and it is only in one location, i.e. the pick phase. Now, if I go into here and run the operations and run scheduler, and if I go back into my letter trade just to check that there is no exceptions, great, there is no exceptions being created in here. And if I go back to my request for quotations and look for the ReadyMat, now you see there are 2 items added in here, right? And the reason it's added this is because this is still in RFQ stage. And what the demand will do is every time you keep needing it, it is going to keep putting it into the same draft PO. Once you have confirmed this PO, it will then next time the demand comes through, it will create a new PO. But until it is in draft, it will keep adding it to it. It might be a product. Sometimes if I now go and create a sales order, the quantity that is more demand, it will create the demand quantity for that, increase it as well. So that should help us in terms of understanding how the routes are being specifically set up for the bulk phase, pick phase, and multiple locations, and how the buy process works in this case. Now, that's all about buy. I think I have to cover. I'm sure you'll have questions and you guys will email me, no problem. Right. And let me now cover the manufacturing process. So what will happen if the same thing that we need, and I think it was the plastic laminate in here that we are used up. So there is a bill of material that is there, and it uses some ply veneer, and it is a storable product. I'll just make sure. Yeah, it is a storable product, and the kit of bill of material is a manufacturer this product kit. Yep, perfect. So I will just, for the sake of stuff, I will just add some two screws as well. It looks good when a bill of material has got more than one line on it. Right, so I have got a bill of material set up for this, and there is a plastic laminate, right? Now, in here, if I go into my inventory, I have not specified the route as to how I'm going to be getting it. So if I go into edit in here, I'll say this one, I'm not buying it, I'm going to be manufacturing it. Good. And what I want to do is I want to set up a reorder level for this, right? Again, for my AKL stock, and my min is going to be, I need 2, and the max is going to be 5. Right. So now let me go and run the scheduler again. Okay. If I go run. Now, just a reminder, this scheduler is sent to run on a Odoo schedule every hour, every half an hour. Depends on what our needs are in terms of how often we want it to run. In most cases, it is set to run every hour, right? So let me go refresh the plastic laminate in here and just make sure that there is no issues. Yep, all good. And what I'm expecting to see this time is if I go from purchases into the manufacturing app, and operations and manufacturing orders. So I am, yep, so there it is. So it has created a new manufacturing order for the plastic laminate and for up to a quantity of 5, because that is what I put in, and it's put the bill of material with the need for what I need from a quantity perspective to make it. Now, if I did want to create an automatic purchase order whenever my ply veneer is below minimum, I can set up the buy rule against the ply veneer, and this, when I confirm this particular manufacturing order, will trigger the draft purchase order for it to buy the stock that we need to make it, right? I hope it all makes sense. Sometimes it's difficult to understand. Now, one other thing I wanted to mention is when a manufacturing order or a purchase order is being created by a min-max that we have set up, it will have a source document in here. So you see the source in here is OP00010. So how did it get that particular number? So when I go into my min-max in here, there is a name that it will have. Yeah, it is now going to prove that I'm a liar. So there is a name for each one of these each one of the demand that we have in here, the min-max rule, and that is a name that gets used up within, that is a name that gets filled in the purchase order or in the, I know where to find it. Under configurations, if you go to reordering rules, there you will see it. So as an example, if I come over here under reordering rules and I look for plastic laminate, it is going to make a liar out of me again. I've seen it, but I'll figure out why it's not coming. Right. And again, just for if I go to the purchase order as well, and if I look at the ready-made purchase order in here, and if I look at the other information here, it will have the source documents of what are the rules that created the source document. And if, okay, here's the way to probably prove that I'm not lying, is if I go back into the reordering rules, and if I search for the rule in here, and that comes up with the rule that has actually created. So I can search for that rule and get it. The name is in there, it just has a hidden field, just not displayed on the screen. Right, so that is the buying manufacturing, the buying route. Then there is the route for manufacturing as well. Then there can be routes also for a few other things. Let's hypothetically say we want to create one more route wherein I want to do an internal transfer. So I am going to be doing a transfer from my, what are the warehouses I got? So from my Auckland warehouse to the Wellington warehouse, and I want it to go via a transit location. Okay, it can be, that transit location can be within Auckland, within Wellington, or a transit warehouse, can it be its own warehouse for that matter? It doesn't really, it can be taken either or. So if I wanted, I can create a so I have created a transit warehouse, right? And because I have created it, it should have created the necessary locations for the transit. So I've got a transit stock in here. Great. Now, what I typically do is, now in this case, I only got Auckland and Wellington. So it's kind of going to be easy for me to use this one location. But hypothetically say, if you've got Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch, Dunedin, multiple areas in there, then the right way that you could do it is because you want to track stock every time it is coming from Auckland to Wellington, every time it's going from Wellington to Dunedin, every time it's going from Dunedin to Auckland. So what I could, in that particular case, do is I could create a new location just for the want of Auckland to Wellington, and the parent location will be the transit stock. And in a similar way, I can create one more to say that if it is Wellington, location name is there, yep. And then I've got Wellington to Auckland as an example. And for this as well, I'll put the transit location. What it gives me the advantage is if I put it this way, then if I want to, I'll show you how the routes come into picture in here in a minute. But if I wanted to look at what stock is going from Auckland to Wellington, I can go into that particular location. I can look at the current stock of what is sitting there. In a similar, if I want to inquire what is coming from Wellington to Auckland is in transit, I can go into that location. I can look at the current stock. Right. Now that I've got these two set up in here, let me go into routes, and I can say that I can now go into the routes in here. So what we want to do is the user is going to be creating a document called internal transfer. And what they are going to be doing is they are going to be taking the stock from Auckland and they are going to be putting it into the Auckland to Wellington transit location. And this is also a good time to cover some bit of the operation types, because when you go to inventory, you see the cards in here. These are all operation types, right? And if I say group by the warehouse, I can see by Auckland, by Wellington, by each warehouse, what are the types of transactions. We have an internal transfer, and we can use an internal transfer to move stock between the two warehouses. But my personal preference will be not to use the internal transfer. My personal preference will be to create a new operation type. And the reason I prefer that to be that way is so that it creates an individual card for internal for intra-warehouse transfers. So ideal world, what I could probably want to do is I'll come in here, I could say duplicate this in here for internal transfers. Internal transfers, I'll say inter-warehouse transfers, right? And this is from Auckland. So I could leave it at that. The source location is going to be AKL stock. I will right now leave the destination location also at AKL stock, but the transactions will kind of drive as to where it's going to go. In most cases, if you have only one branch, then it is easier to say that it is going from, typically when I do a transfer in here, it will go to transit Auckland to Wellington, for example. Right? And if it is intra-transfer, I'll just have it a INR as a number rather than INT as a number, so that it's easier to kind of differentiate between internal transfer and inter-warehouse transfer. Right, so I've set up an operation type in here. Now let us set up the routes and other things as to how this will work. So what I want to be able to do is, I will just open up an Excel spreadsheet just to see if it's easier to explain something. So what we have is, we want the stock in Auckland to go to Auckland Transit to Wellington, and finally finally in Wellington, the stock is going to be. So this is going to be delivery type, and this is going to be receipt type. So from here, when we do the delivery, it will go to Auckland, Wellington, and this I want to automatically create a receipt. Just like you create a PO, it creates a receipt. I want to automatically create a receipt that, hey, this stock is going to come in there the moment there's stock in Auckland to Wellington transit. Right. So what I will do in here is under configuration, under routes, I'll say inter-warehouse route, and I will add a line. So this is, let's say, Auckland to transit location. So sorry, I should be saying that it should be transit to Wellington, because Auckland to transit, a user will do that manually. The moment they have done the transit to Wellington, to the intermediate location, i.e. the transit location, I want Wellington to be able to receive it, right? So if I go into this will be transit just to be clear, from transit. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to pull the stock, actually push the stock to source location will be transit, and the destination location will be my Wellington stock. And the operation type I wanted to use is the inter-warehouse transfer. Right? And this is it. I'll come to what is a manual step and automatic step. But hey, I've just set up. So when products arrive in the, sorry, why is it Auckland stock? This should be the transit. I thought I'd change it. Right. So when products arrive in the transit Auckland to Wellington, a inter-warehouse transfer gets created to send them to this particular location, right? And I can have multiple of those inter-warehouse transfers. And this inter-warehouse transfer, just to be sure, I should probably be creating it under Wellington because I don't want to appear it in I don't want this to appear under Auckland because it's a Wellington's job to receive it. Right. So I have now done this bit of it. What I will do next is I will now go and move some stock from Auckland into the transit location. Okay. So I go to inventory, and under inventory, I can say group by warehouse so that I can see the different operation types in here. And I have, as I said, I can create an operation type separately, but for me being a lazy person right now, I'll just go and create an internal transfer. So create an internal transfer, and this is going from Auckland stock to Auckland Wellington, and I need some products which will have quantity on them. So let's just bear with me. I'll go in here, products and products. Look for something individual workspace. There are no attributes that it's easier, 16 on hand, and that 16 is in Auckland stock. Perfect. So I'll use this as an example individual workspace. So I will create in Hindi here. And I'm going to be doing 5 minutes of this. Right. So I go save and I go validate. Right. So now if I look at my stock for the individual workspace in here, if I go on hand, I should be seeing 2 of those in here. And at this stage, I've got quantity hand of 11 and 5. Good. Now, if I go into my inventory and if I look at group by warehouse in here, and if I look at internal intra-warehouse in here, there should be a route created in here. Operations, run scheduler, process. Why is it not doing this? Let me check my route. Configuration, routes. I know why. No chocolate fish for you for guessing that, because what I had not done is in the product that I wanted, I have not chosen that. So it was which product was that? Individual works. Under the inventory, this is where I had missed the stick, right? Because I not put the tick, it's not, I've not told the system, hey, that route applies to that particular product. It's not going to do anything with it. And that's the reason I couldn't see it, right? So, yep. Sorry, sometimes I make my own training videos a bit more confusing than they need to. Apologies for that. Right, so now that I have set this up, what I'm expecting to see in here is still not coming through. I know why, because the rule was when the stock arrives in there. So let me just create another transfer. So, and back into inventory, group it by warehouse, back into Auckland internal transfers. Let me look at the last one that I had done in here. Being lazy person, actually action, duplicate this, and in here, individual workspace. And what I'll do is add a line from Auckland to transit and put 3 quantities in here. Save and validate this. Right, now, third time lucky. I should have something to see in here to be able to process. Products, individual workspace, storable product, under inventory inter-warehouse, and under routes. Got the inter-warehouse, and the inter-warehouse says push the stock to, again, why did something has changed? So this should, the source location should be, because what, maybe I did not hit the save button properly. Transit. And the destination location was supposed to be Wellington stock. And save it, and save it. And let me just see this looks right. Save it, save it. Sometimes I don't trust myself. Yeah, that looks correct. Don't know why, whether I'd not saved it. I shall go back to my video and review to see if I've saved it or not. That's a good part of recording, but let us continue in here. Right, so now that I've done this, if I go into inventory and run scheduler here, let us see, is under the operations in here. There is still nothing to be processed. Configuration routes, into warehouse. And this is going to say when products arrive in there. So yeah, as I had anticipated. So I will go in and create a new internal transfer again. And I'll use the done one previously I'd done. Action, duplicate. And this was for individual workspace. And this time I'll do 4 of that, save it and validate it. Right now, if I go back into here, into my inventory overview, yay! I have got the inter-warehouse transfer in here, and this has now been created automatically by the system. Just now, as you can see, is so that I can now receive it. When Wellington physically receive the stock, they can go in here, they can put the quantity and validate it. That's the logic of it. Sorry, this bit took a bit more longer than I anticipated because there are some things that is not saying correctly. So that's the plan for me to show how the routes in general work. If you have any other questions, do let me know. If I needed to do an addendum to this video, I can record more and add to it. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. Sorry about the fluffing around.